everybody, Tyrone the God 3 here, and Natalie is here with me.
Hello.
And we're here to bring you more Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters Madness Marathon Monstravaganza. And in order to continue giving you that, we need to go back in time. 3,000 or 5,000 years in the past in order to bring you the rest of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters March Marathon, because we are down to our final arc. And yes, we know capsule monsters exist, and we'll talk about it later. But we're moving on to the important stuff. And we just got done doing Silverboard, Calcos, and Grand Championships. Cut us a break.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't do a third filler saga. We just can't. It'll break us. So, this is the final arc. It's known as the Pharaoh's Memory Arc, also known as Dawn of the Duels. There's also, it's called Ceremonial Battle as well, but that's the second half of the Dawn of the Duels arc. So, with this one, this is the final season. What did you think knowing that this was going to be the final season? Because I believe they advertised it as the final season even on Kids WB when it made its debut.
So that was like, I think I mentioned before, I kind of dropped out during Orichalcos when I was little, so I don't remember any like marketing for like the end of Yu-Gi-Oh! But
yeah.
I mean, of course I had high expectations. It was like, we've been following this plot for so long, I better get a good ending.
I was watching this as a kid on Kids WB, I believe. Or I wasn't a kid anymore. I was like a teenager at this point. And they were just like, again, in this final season of Yu-Gi-Oh! Answers. Questions will be answered. Mysteries will be unlocked. Monsters will be released. And the origin of dueling will be revealed. It was just this very over-the-top commercial about the final season of Yu-Gi-Oh! And just how everything is going to unfold. So I thought it was pretty interesting. As a kid going into this, I rose an eyebrow though based on the events that happened, but as I got older and watched it again, my mindset of this arc has changed. So with that said, I know you stated that most of your knowledge of this arc comes from the manga. Is that correct? So we'll be doing this one in a way where I will review the anime perspective of what happened during this arc, and if there's any differences or changes in the manga, Natalie will point them out. Okay? So using our sacred Millennium items,
our powers combined,
right, the Millennium TV and the Millennium manga, we will be able to give you details of the arc in both versions, and hopefully this will be the definitive review because of it. So this arc begins, basically Bakura is unleashing his seeds of evil that he postponed for over 200 episodes, and his first step is to steal the Millennium Ring back from Yugi because he lost it in Battle City, and Yugi's got it back. Merrick stole it by, thankfully using Weevil and Rex because they steal Yugi's Egyptian God cards. But actually, I do want to go back a little bit because I don't know if this was in the manga or not, but do you remember Solomon Moto's Indiana Jones adventure?
Yeah, that's how the manga starts out.
It does?
Yeah, the flashback.
Yes. Yeah. So apparently Grandpa's like freaking 6 feet tall. And he's like going through the tomb of the pharaoh, and he's like unlocking the mysteries, and he's solving all the traps, and because of this he's able to find the Millennium Puzzle, and that's how Yugi got his Millennium Puzzle. What did you think of Grandpa's grand Egyptian adventures?
I thought it was kind of funny because like you said, it's like very like suave, like Indiana Jones, James Bond type, and it seems like so out of place from how we know Grandpa.
Right, it's just so hard to imagine Grandpa in the light of this dude who is just in control. He's got like the Yugi hairstyle, which obviously it kind of looks like that anyway when he was older, but man, age took its toll on him.
He's poor guy.
Right, he's like 4 feet tall. How'd you go from 6 feet to 4 feet?
And isn't he like wearing a suit when he's like in Egypt?
Yeah,
Like,
he's
you're
wearing
going
a
through the
suit.
tomb.
He's got this cowboy ass hat. Like
Yeah.
they definitely like made him a badass in his
Yeah.
younger years. He did say it was a bit exaggerated, so maybe he exaggerated his height for the sake of the story. But at this point, we learn how Grandpa got the Millennium Puzzle, and then obviously Yugi solved it, and here we are today. And after that, Yugi's just going to Egypt, which I don't know how much money these kids have, but like I'm a grown adult, and I don't have the money to like go to another state, let alone another country, just whenever. They just came back from America. Like, they just left California not so long ago, and now they're headed to Egypt. Like, whatever. So they're headed to Cairo, Egypt, and Joey, Taya, and Tristan are all going along as well because friendship. And when they head to Cairo, Egypt, I believe Kaiba is at his place, trying to restore his company again. And Bakura just sort of steals Mokuba again because that happens. And in order to do that, Kaiba's dueling him. And I lied. I said that the last one was Kaiba's final duel. Which, well, technically I'm right and I lied. This is Kaiba's final duel technically, but it's never finished. This duel does not have a conclusion. Bakura just needed his monster, Diabound, to gain the powers of the Blue Eyes White Dragon.
Interesting, because this does not happen in the manga.
It doesn't? What happens in the manga? What's the difference?
Well, obviously, Yugi and all his friends go to Egypt, and, the Ishtars are there to meet him, but, Kaiba's not really sucked in at all. Bakura doesn't kidnap Mokuba or anything.
Okay. So yeah. wait, so how does Kaiba... Kaiba just goes to Egypt?
I think so. Yeah,
because he's the decision.
Yeah, so it's...
Okay.
I like how the anime is no, Mokuba must be kidnapped.
Right, just one last time. One last time for good.
Please.
One more time for old time's sake, Kaiba. Oh, goodness. But, yeah, I guess they wanted to give Kaiba more of an incentive, because the anime version makes Kaiba a little bit more stuck up to the idea that this Egyptian stuff isn't real. So the idea behind it is to convince Kaiba to go to Egypt. They kidnap Mokuba, and when Kaiba duels Bakura, their duel doesn't get finished because Bakura just needed to, gain some power from Blue Eyes real fast. After that, Bakura somehow gets to Cairo, Egypt before Yugi and the others, even though they left first. And he doesn't even
out here teleporting.
Right. So, at that point, Kaiba is given the Millennium Eye. The reason he's given the Millennium Eye, Bakura gives it to him and is like, if you want to learn more, head down to Egypt. And Kaiba's like, whatever, I'm not going to Egypt. Minutes later, I can't believe I'm going to Egypt.
Yeah, it's so funny.
He changes his mind so quick. Yeah. But Yugi and the others are already in Cairo, Egypt, and Taya ends up buying this item known as a cartouche, a little trinket that allows someone to write something on the cartouche so that you can, keep track of it. It's basically a dog tag for ancient Egypt. And I don't know why, I just wanted Yugi to turn it around. It's my true name. It says made in China.
Oh my god.
I just wanted that to happen once. I know it's not gonna. I just want it though.
So funny.
It says made in China. Taya, that's my name.
It was that easy.
It was that arc over. But so at that point when they head off, the reason that there is because the stone tablet got moved from Japan to Egypt, because it got moved back. So Yugi needs to hold up the 3 Egyptian guide cards. When Yugi holds those 3 Egyptian guide cards up, he gets sucked into the world of the past, and Bakura it gets sucked in as well because he placed a bit of himself into Yugi's Millennium Puzzle way back in the beginning of season 2. So he's allowed to go back as well. So Yugi and Bakura both end up going back, leaving little Yugi, Joey, Taya, and the others, and Tristan just wondering what exactly happened. It's at this point we see Yugi is in the past. Now, I want to ask, what do you think about this very convoluted plan that Bakura has to get Yugi to go to the past?
I mean, I guess when you lay it out on paper, it's like, oh yeah, that did happen, but it's just so long in between.
Like, so many episodes happened since then. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just easy to forget where all this came from.
Right. So, because Yugi's taken to the past, he's introduced to the 6 sacred guardians of Egypt. They are known, and pray for me, because I'm going to get these. Correct me if I get any of them wrong, because I might.
Oh.
These are the members who will hold the Millennium Items. They're the sacred guardians of the Pharaoh. They're sworn to protect the Pharaoh at all costs, and they hold Millennium Items in order to protect him. And they include Master Akhenaten, Isis, Seto, Shaddai, Kareem, and Mahad. And and each one respectively holds a Millennium Item. Master Mahad owns the Millennium Ring. Master Kareem owns the Millennium Scale.
Yeah, I think scales.
Yeah, he has the scale. Master Akhenaten has the Millennium Eye. Master Seto has the Millennium Rod. Miss Isis has the Millennium Necklace, because she's basically a Shizu.
Yeah.
And Master Shaddai has the Millennium Key, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, because of this, Yugi gets into... What do you think of these characters? They're introduced here, so what do you think?
I mean, it always kind of makes me laugh, because I know... Just because you're, are picking out, oh, this is that character. Like, you said, oh, Isis is just a Shizu. It's like, oh, wow, this guy is Seto. I wonder who that is. So,
it's Taya, right?
Some of them yeah, right, yeah. But then other ones are just kind of off the wall.
Yeah.
Just since some of them match up so well, I'm like, well, who's Akhenaten? I'm like,
when
is he Pegasus?
Yeah, when I first saw Mahad, I was a bit confused, and then quickly Mahad's pieces start clicking.
Yeah.
Once you realize his fate. And at this point, we see Bakura has transported back to his original body, he was a common thief. So that is exactly what he came back as, but he's armed with the knowledge of, everything that's taken place. So he's basically able to head to the palace of the Pharaoh Master, and this is the Pharaoh before Yugi was Pharaoh. Master Pharaoh Akhenaten. Yes.
Yeah. His dad.
Yeah, his dad, Akhenaten. And Yugi's also introduced to his royal vizier, known as Master Shimon. Which is Grandpa. It's Grandpa.
Yeah, it's Grandpa.
It's Grandpa. Let's cut the shit. It's Grandpa.
Yeah.
But when that happens, Bakura easily sneaks into the palace, freaking chucks the tomb of Master Akhenaten in front of Yugi, and he's like, I brought your dead dad.
Yeah.
And he starts attacking everybody with his trademark monster, Diabound. And the others have to fight him, and Yugi learns the origin of dual monsters. And at this point, each of the guardians end up summoning monsters on these devices that sound so stupid, I'm not going to say their names. I'm just going to call them Ancient Dual Disc.
Oh, really?
What? Did that not happen in the manga?
I feel like it was just stone tablets.
Oh, they just lit the stone tablets. Okay, in the anime, they needed to make them look like dual discs. So there's these ancient little things they've got, and the light on the eye represents their life points, kinda how much life energy they have.
Go Google this. I want to see what they look like.
Yeah, go ahead. It's great. And there's spots for each of the monsters to show up on. Yeah, I'm dead serious. This exists.
Oh my gosh.
Okay,
so Yugioh Ancient Duel Disc.
Yeah, so while you're looking that up, I'm going to continue the rest of the story. While this happens, Bakura's Diabound is strong enough to fight off pretty much every monster. They need to stop Bakura, but obviously they're not strong enough. Yugi finally decides to take a stand, and he summons Obelisk the Tormentor. Because Yugi has the Millennium Puzzle, he's able to summon the Egyptian God cards. And one thing I do like about Obelisk actually has these cool markings in this version. I guess because they're actually in Egypt now.
Yeah.
So they want to make Obelisk look more like his Egyptian roots. So I thought that was pretty cool. And because Diabound absorbed Blue Eyes White Dragon's power during Bakura's duel, it was able to resist Obelisk the Tormentor's attacks a little bit. So they didn't get destroyed, but Bakura did have to retreat. So he retreats, and when he retreats, that just leaves the others sort of wondering what happened and what to do next. So what did you think of this battle that they had against Bakura?
I thought it was pretty cool because, well, now the dual discs are throwing me off, but at least...
Sorry.
Well, it's just kind of funny because the anime seems, because of like the minor changes like the dual discs, it's so much heavier in marketing than the manga seems to be.
Yes.
But anyway, like in the manga, it's really cool because this is the first one where it's like, oh, it's stone slabs and magic. It's not just paper trading cards.
Yeah.
So I was really excited because the duel seemed different and like it had more stakes to it. Especially because when Bakura comes in swinging around a mummy of his dad.
Yeah.
Like, oh shit. Yeah.
I thought it was kind of interesting that Shaddai, he has the Millennium Scale. So because he has not Shaddai, I'm sorry, Kareem. Kareem has the Millennium Scale. So because he has the Millennium Scale, it is able to balance two monsters out and fuse them together. So basically the Millennium Scale is polymerization. And so it fuses monsters together to fight off against Diabound. I thought that was pretty interesting. So yeah, just, like you said, those elements are pretty cool to show that, that they're doing things like that. They're still trapped in stone tablets. Like, the monsters are still trapped in stone tablets. Right. It's just, like, they're summoned using the I'll call them the ancient dual disc. They have names. I just can't remember the names, and they're so stupid I don't want to name them. So, in the comments, if you know it, you can put it, but I'm not going to say it because they sound dumb. After that duel, though, everybody's sort of in a tizzy about the events that have happened, and they need to stay on guard. And Mahad is really determined to defeat Bakura at any cost. So he heads off into his into a sacred tomb of the magicians in order to gain this power that he locked away a long time ago that makes him basically a super strong magician. Also, this is how I was able to put the clues together. Mahad's monster that he summons is the Illusion Magician. And it's basically Dark Magician with no face. And at that point, I was able to put 2 and 2 together. I know Mahad's fate. But, so after that, after we learn of his fate, it looks like he's gonna die, basically. That's how they kind of build it up. Like, Mahad's gonna die. Yeah. So, Isis is worried, which I like that. I like that relationship that they sort of hold. Yeah. Yeah, and we also are introduced to another character at this point. What was her name? She's basically Dark Magician Girl.
Mana.
Mana, yeah. What did you think of Mana? She's Dark Magician Girl.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, she's cute, but to me, she kind of seems a little out of place with the rest of the cast, just because she's so, like, bubbly and, like, I don't know.
It does throw off the tone of what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, it completely throws off the tone of what's happening. And I'll talk about her in a minute, because, something confuses me about her. And I'll reveal that later. So Bakura heads into the tomb in order to fight off against Mahad. Mahad and Bakura have a pretty good fight. Illusion Magician's much stronger now. And at this point, if you don't know it's Dark Magician, at this point you need to get slapped. Because it's clearly Dark Magician. And when the fight escalates to a point where apparently Bakura's monster, Diabound, gets stronger with each monster it beats. So it's able to learn, like, Shadow Illusion from Shadow Ghoul and stuff like that. And at that point, Mahad has no choice but to fuse his own spirit with the Illusion Magician to become the Dark Magician. So at that point, Yugi and they sort of regroup and arrive. But by the time they arrive, it's a little too late. It's already been done. He's fused into Dark Magician, and there's nothing left of Mahad except that monster, so he can protect Yugi the whole route now. We're also introduced to another character, Kisara, and she's the spirit of the Blue Eyes White Dragon. So after this battle with Bakura, what do you think? What did you think of the events that happened during the whole fight?
I thought it was good. Like, it's I don't know if maybe I read too fast, but it's like this happens kind of early on, to get him as Dark Magician. So I'm like, I wish they had a little more time, like connecting Mahad with the Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I feel like it could be more emotional, but this also was like kind of fast paced. So
I
whatever.
remember.
But I thought it was still good.
Yeah, I remember, and now that you mention it, Mahad says something to Yugi, and Yugi can't remember his name at all. So he's like, "Thank you. What's his name?" Oh shit. Thank you. You. Good old you.
And then he goes off and dies for him.
Right. Like it
you
just.
were my best friend.
Yeah, totally. So we do get some flashbacks with Yugi too, where we learn that the Pharaoh actually was like sucking poison out of his out of Mahad's arm so that he could be protected and stuff. Like they make the Pharaoh off as a pretty legitimately good person, which that's good. I'm glad they decided to do that. I don't know if the manga had any flashbacks, but
nope. It didn't have that stuff. Like, I know there's stuff about, like, Mana and Mahad and him when they're younger, but I don't think there's much of that.
So in other words, the manga does feel awkward because it just sort of jumps to this fight.
Right, yeah.
Okay, well, that and the anime gives us a little bit more time to, like, settle their relationship. It's not as strong, definitely, but it does establish some form of a relationship.
Right. Yeah.
At this point, I believe the next step for Bakura, since the Dark Magician did do some damage to him, so he just sort of retreats again, and they just sort of have to find Bakura at this point. We learn a lot of backstory about Kisara and her spirit of the Blue Eyes White Dragon. And, because the whole name of the game is that everybody apparently has some darkness in their heart. And that darkness gets sealed into a stone tablet to make the dual monsters that we see in the Shadow game. So, when that does happen, we see that Kisara has one of the most powerful spirits of all. But no one's ever sealed her. And Bakura is mad at this entire situation because he states that this whole situation started when the former pharaoh Akhenaten burned his entire village to the ground thanks to the efforts of the events that took place in the city of Kal Elna. So, what did you think of this little plot reveal?
I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, it definitely gives Bakura a very sympathetic background, because it's like, they had to kill 99 people, and I was the one that was left.
Right.
So, yeah.
I want to say I do like the idea of this because I didn't like the idea that Yugi and the pharaoh and his father and everybody was just these goody two-shoes for all of Egypt. Like, I knew there had to be some darkness in there or some, like, something. And they usually do this a lot with things. Like, I don't know if this is a relevant reference, but I know in Black Panther, in that movie, T'Chaka wasn't exactly a goody two-shoes. He did some messed up stuff, which allows T'Challa, his son, to think some things over as how they rule. So a similar situation happens here where apparently the Millennium Items, while they're powerful, were created by taking the souls of hundreds of people, and extracting them and putting them into the Millennium Items along with gold. Now, in the anime, it's just good people. I mean, not good people, evil people. Does it change in the manga, or is it just the same?
I think it's more, like, that's what the priests kind of say, is it's like they saw that village as just being full of evil people. So they're like, okay, kill those people. So it's, like, more ambiguous. It's like,
I get it. It's just like, okay, so they just wiped out an entire demographic of people, because it's like, they're just lowly peasants. They could be evil.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, it just was made with the blood of, like, 99 people and some gold. And it created that. And in creation of the Millennium Items, it also brought upon Zork, which is the god of the Shadow Realm. So, what you think of Zork?
I mean, he's cool, I guess. Like, all all the Zork stuff is where I start getting really confused
Yeah.
as to like who's who.
It doesn't make a major reveal until later about Zork, but we get a preview of his powers when the Millennium items are created. And it's not Akhenaten Khan, and it's Akhenaten who's the one that is placed in these events. And the reason that's the case is because Akhenaten is Akhenaten Khan's brother. Right? So basically the Pharaoh and Seto are cousins. And yeah. He even kind of says it like that, like, are you supposed to tell me we're cousins? Yeah. During that situation though, Akhenaten, the brother, decides that the best thing for Egypt and to, help them vanquish darkness is that they're going to need to forge some items. But in order to do that, he needs to keep a low profile. So he abandons his family. He abandons his wife and his young son Seto. And they're like, Seto must never know that I'm his father. Which is weird because he's like standing. Like he's old enough to stand. I think he's old enough to recognize who the fuck his father is. It's so stupid. But when he does all of this, he burns the village of Kal Elna to the ground around the same time that Seto, saves Kisara. So, and Kisara is like, I'll never forget you, Seto, for saving me. And the village burns down around the same time. But thankfully, Seto was able to rise through the ranks from peasant to prince, I guess. And he becomes one of the royal guards. And that makes Master Akhenaten very surprised that his son rose through those ranks. So that's why he just sort of teaches Seto a lot of the ropes, because he's teaching his own son. He just doesn't know. Yeah, like Seto doesn't know. And during all of this, during everything that does happen, I believe what else happens is that Yugioh is able to find out, once they find out all this lore, Yugioh ends up fighting off against Bakura again. And Bakura summons Diabound, and this time it's stronger because it can hide in the darkness. So every time it's dark, this thing's invisible. So Yugioh ends up summoning Winged Dragon of Ra. Since it's the sun god, it's able to bring out the sun, revealing Diabound and killing it. And, Yugioh and the others actually end up going through the Pharaoh's memories, and they end up meeting Yugioh as well. Thanks to the idea that since they're technically inside the Millennium Puzzle, they're able to meet back up with him. And when they do back up with Yugioh, he's able to gain the strength to summon Ra, defeat Bakura, and that's the end. Ish. So what did you think of that battle?
I thought it was pretty good. It was a little cheap at the end, because that's the thing. I don't know if it's the same in the anime, that like this whole kind of time, was it that, what's his name, like Bobassa,
the genie? Yes.
Yeah, like he, gets them into like Yugioh's, like pretty much like his soul room or whatever, and they're just looking for the door, and that's when they come in right at the minute that he needs help before he dies.
Yeah.
So it's like still one of those last minute things of like, but it was like, it's a cool duel, and especially like same with Obelisk, like seeing the gods as more than just trading cards, and they like legit have like godly worldly strength. It's really cool. Yeah.
It is cool to see, and I do like the dark backstory that came accompanied alongside it. I will admit, and I forgot, you just mentioned Bobassa, and I want to point that out. Bobassa bugs me because one, I hated his jokes. All of them revolve around him just being fat.
Right.
Like the whole joke was like, I'm very fat and I'm low-key racist.
Yes.
So at that point, when they meet up with Yugioh and he gets the strength to summon Ra again, the victory is obviously short-lived, and I felt like this was a little half-baked. Considering if you would look at the episode count, it's from 199 all the way to 207, so something's up. It's at this point that we see that time goes backwards.
Yep.
So everything goes completely backwards. Everything gets reversed. Diabound doesn't get destroyed. Bakura reverses time to the point where before before he gets destroyed, but after Slifer gets destroyed. That way, Diabound still has some of Slifer's power in it. And because he reversed time, he was able to take advantage of that and beat and take Yugi's Millennium Puzzle and beat him.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of Yugi getting his butt kicked?
I don't like it.
It is a pretty messed up ending.
Yeah, because it's just, it's one of those things where it's never really... I wouldn't mind this stuff if it's laid out beforehand, but it's not till now where it's like, oh, I can also reverse time. Like, okay.
I think it's really cheap that Bakura relied on reversing time. Like, oh, my bad. My plans didn't work the way I thought they would. Do over. Redo.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a cheap move on both the hero and villain's perspective. The cheap move that you mentioned for the heroes is that Yugi and the others arrive just on time. But the cheap move for Bakura is that Bakura is able to flip time back to his favor. So it's just sort of wonky after that. And then I believe the rest of this, a lot of these episodes are just looking for Yugi. I believe. Yeah, and I think Tristan punches Bakura in the face.
He does. He doesn't do it in the manga, but I've seen that in the anime, and I love it.
Yeah, he punches him in the face.
Go Tristan!
Yeah, but unfortunately, that's his downside. That's his wrongdoing, because Bakura ends up, possessing him. And I gotta say, poor Tristan, because, isn't this his second time getting possessed by something?
Yeah, because of the Big Five or whatever.
Yeah, the Big Five ended up taking over his body as well. So it's like Bakura. So Tristan's always like the face of evil, unfortunately. Yeah. So after that, though, Yugi and the others are looking for him. Now, this is what bugs me. They're able to see Mana. Because when Yugi and the others arrive in the village, it's clear that they can't be seen by anybody in this world. They can't be. They can't touch anything. But for some reason, they can see Bobasa and they can see Mana. Now, Bobasa, I really don't know. Like, I have no clear-cut, reason or rhyme as to why they can see him. Mana, I really don't know either. I'm guessing it's because she's magical.
So wait, you mean they interact, they talk and stuff?
Yeah, they talk with Mana. Oh. What happens in the manga?
Well, they just, come to the memory world with Bobasa. He gets them in. So that's why they all can talk. But, yeah, the gang, never interacts with Mana.
Ah,
so that's interesting.
Yeah, okay, so that's a big difference, too. Cause,
there's a lot of differences.
Yeah, that is a big difference. They can talk with Mana. They can talk with her. They can interact with her. Yugi even's like, hey, you remind me of a trading card.
I get that a lot.
That's exactly what you say to a woman, right?
Oh my gosh.
Hey, girl, you ever been told you remind me of a trading card?
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much because in the manga, she just she's there, and they're like, "Oh, your power's not enough yet," and she just kind of doesn't come back until after Mahata's gone.
Yeah.
And then she's like, "Oh, I'm training to get stronger." So I'm sure the anime, gave her a bigger role because Dark Magician Girl, and gives her more to do.
I'm gonna BS this and say that because she's magical, she can talk to magical beings. In Yugi's case, that means Yugi and the others technically, since they don't technically belong here. I'm BSing away.
Why not?
For it to work.
Yeah.
And then at this point, we get what I like to... Now, this is an arc that's happening within an arc. I call this the Village of Vengeance arc. Because they end... Bakura sets the battle for Kal Elna. Right? And he wants to get the rest of the Millennium items. So, in order to get the rest of the Millennium items... Because during that big fight that they had previously... Bakura does get knocked into the but he has 2 Millennium items now. So he just needs 5. When he goes in, he goes and sends a bunch of dead spirits from Kal Elna, basically everybody that died during the murder of Kal Elna, to fight, and try to take over while Yugi is not in commission, because they're looking for Yugi at this point, and Yugi has to return back. And also Yugi receives word from not his father, Hassan, the guardian of the pharaohs. And he learned, this is how Yugi learns of Zork. the Dark Being,
Yeah.
or Zork the Necromancer, or whatever the hell he's called.
Yeah.
At this point, when they're in the village and all of the guardians are fighting off against the dead spirits, this is where Yugi learns that all this time he's been playing a game against Bakura, a board game called Dark RPG. Now, what do you think of this reveal?
It's another thing I wasn't a huge fan of, because I'm like, it just seems kind of unnecessary. Oh, it's like, we're already back in ancient Egypt and having, like, you know, Yugi's in this world and there's a subplot, and then you're going to tell me it's a game within a game? Like, why? But what do you think?
I've got to be honest, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
It sort of broke the immersion of everything I was getting into already. It sort of knocks off the whole, like, story element when it's like everything that you know is fake.
Yeah.
We're just role playing. And I also don't like,
because you know, all those like you're saying, like all those super emotional moments and stuff, you're like, oh, so were they just like, was Bakura just like saying lines and moving pieces around the board?
Right, like Bakura's a dungeon master in this. And
Yeah.
I gotta say, if Dark RPG were a real game, Bakura would be the shittiest RPG to ever exist. Bakura has literally all the pieces. Like, this is so unfair. So Bakura has like 3 trinkets that allow him to get an advantage, and I'll explain them now so I won't have to explain them later. The first trinket he has was the one that he used to reverse time, so the Sands of Time reverse. Basically an hourglass that a regular hourglass. So when he's losing, he can use it once to reverse time. The second one he has is a sideways hourglass. This has the ability to freeze time within the game, which is stupid. Every character except his gets frozen. The third item he has is known as the Sands of Darkness. It's an hourglass that when it runs out, Zork will be released regardless of if Bakura has Yugi's real name or not. What do you think of these broken ass items?
Yeah, it just sounds like if you were to play a game with like a 6-year-old and you start winning, it's like, no, this makes everyone freeze except me.
Yeah, it's such bullshit. Like like I wouldn't mind the dark RPG element so much if it weren't for the fact that like the game is so obnoxiously broken in Bakura's favor.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't even mind. Oh, so there's 3 Bakuras, by the way. Just want to let you know that.
Yes.
Yeah, there's the Great Thief Bakura that actually existed in the timeline. There's the Spirit of Bakura. And then there's one more Bakura that we're not going to talk about just yet. So when Yugi plays, it's clear that Bakura's going to win. Bakura ends up getting all of the Millennium items together and actually even tries to attack Yugi. But thankfully, Yugi has a game piece magically. Hassan, the defender of the pharaohs, he's able to summon Hassan and block the assault. Now, when this does happen, Bakura even asks the questions, how did you get that game piece? He never tells him. Yugi just had it whole time.
Yeah.
What did you think of that?
In the manga, like Bobasa is actually Hassan. Is that the same in the anime?
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah. What?
Yeah, because Hassan is the guy with like the gold mask and stuff, right?
That's some old bullshit. Bobasa's
I thought so.
Bobasa's just a fat asshole in my version. He's Hassan.
Let me double check.
That's amazing.
I thought he was someone, or maybe. Hold on, now I gotta double check myself because I don't want to be wrong. But yeah, I know like Bobasa, he turns into something else.
Okay.
Let me see.
Well, in my version, Bobasa does something, but to help them win the game, but it's not turning into freaking Hassan.
Mm-hmm. Oh wait, no. Hassan is shoddy. Hold on. This is hard.
Well, no. Okay, so that part
confused.
is true. Shadi turns into Hassan later, but
yeah.
Okay, so just it's amazing though when Yugi ends up using the master item And that when Hassan blocks the shot, and when Hassan blocks the shot, we learn that Master Akhenaten has a lot of darkness in his heart, and that Bakura let it out earlier when during the whole Village of Spirits fight. Before it actually, and it starts to come out. Akhenaten is low-key jealous of his brother Akhenaten for being pharaoh and he not having that position. He's just forced to being a royal guard. So he believes that Seto, his son, should be the pharaoh. So he's going through. He's literally an extra player in Bakura's game, and becomes the dark, the dark master. And because he becomes the Dark Master, he ends up taking Kaiba and transporting him to a different locale so that he can corrupt him so that Kaiba can become evil. Right? During all of this, everybody else, I believe, is split up. Bakura comes back, and at this point, Seto Kaiba, the our timeline Kaiba, ends up being taken into the game because Bakura gave Kaiba the Millennium Eye. And because he gave him the Millennium Eye, he's able to transport Kaiba to the realm of memories along with the others and transport him as a player in the Dark RPG games. What's the difference?
Well, so, there's so many. I mean, the whole thing about Akhenaten trying to corrupt Seto is the same, but it's like towards the end. And Kaiba does not join in on the games, like Bakura, like Yami Bakura, not talking ancient Egypt one. Kaiba, he does not get him in it.
Okay.
So yeah, which I'm sure all of this is like for marketing. Like Kaiba's a huge face for the series. So
Kaiba gets transported into the game, and because Kaiba gets transported to the game, they originally defeated Bakura, but Bakura ends up coming back because of that. In a similar matter to how Yugi was able to gain strength because he was the pharaoh was next to little Yugi, so he gave him powers back. Same principle, just makes no damn sense. So at that point, Bakura is back, and he uses Diabound, and he uses Diabound's powers to teleport everybody to different locations. And he does this so that everybody can be separated, and that'll give Bakura enough time for Zork to be released, because he uses his third item, which is the Sands of Darkness. Once time runs out, Zork will be released regardless of if Bakura has the name or not. So at that point, it's a race against time to stop Zork from being released. Everybody's trying to locate each other and find each other and regroup. And while that's happening, Kaiba is slowly getting corrupted. Akhenaten, what he does is that he takes, earlier, he took a lot of prisoners and forced them to fight against each other so that their darkness can make their monsters grow. And then he ended up kidnapping Kisara so that her darkness can release the Blue Eyes White Dragon so that Kaiba can take control of it so that he can become the true pharaoh of Egypt, because apparently the Blue Eyes is stronger than the Egyptian god cards. At least in the weird examples that they're giving, which it's not the case, but Kaiba ends up saving Kisara from Akhenaten's trap. But unfortunately, Akhenaten is possessing Kaiba this time, so he breaks the control and releases Kisara's spirit so the Blue Eyes is released. But Akhenaten goes, okay, since you keep resisting me, he puts his spirit inside of Seto's so that Seto becomes evil and controls the Blue Eyes. The Pharaoh arrives just in that moment and summons Dark Magician, and we get our trademark little Dark Magician versus Blue Eyes White Dragon fight that's on the stone tablet. What did you think of this battle?
See, this part is very different in what I read.
Oh, God. I believe we've reached a split.
We really have. So I'll just quickly recap. But, like, in the manga, it's more that Seto kind of does, like, a citywide hunt to gather these prisoners himself.
Yes.
It's not just Akhenaten doing it. And so he, like, Kisara was, like, gonna be, like, I don't know, stoned or something. And so he, like, saves her and then, you know, finds her monster. But yeah, there's none of this, like, he wasn't really innocent. He was just kind of like, oh, I could use this girl. And then this whole duel between Yugi and Seto doesn't happen, like, really almost until the end.
Okay.
When, like, Zork's almost gone. So
I do want to clarify, some parts did happen. Kisara did get rocks thrown at her because the villagers feared of her Blue Eyes White Dragon powers.
Yeah.
So when that happens, sorry about that in the background. So when that does happen, Joey, Yugi, Tristan, and the others are there, but they can't do anything about it because everything phases through them. It's here where they're introduced to Seto, and he basically saves her because Seto during that time was gathering criminals in order to extract their monsters from their body. So he was doing that part. It happened so briefly, but it was during that time. That's why he took Kasara in. Akhenaten kidnapped her at that point, and that's where we ended up with that whole situation there. Yugi and Kaiba end up having their little fight. Dark Magician loses. Ooh. Yeah, it just gets his butt kicked. But thankfully, Kisara was able to place her spirit into Seto's, and combined, it was able to stop. It was able to stop that whole situation from happening. Like, Kai was able to break Akhenaten's control, and they were able to wipe Akhenaten out. So he's gone. After that, we just sort of get a fall by fall of each person. What ends up happening afterwards is while Yugi and the others are trying to locate the Pharaoh's real name, they go to the palace, and when they do go to the palace, they make it deep inside. Tristan starts to finally reveal himself to be evil. Because Bakura's,
that's so funny.
Yeah, Bakura's spirit is in him. So they get closer and closer, but obviously the closer they get, the more Tristan starts acting like a jackass. I'm not sure how Joey didn't catch on to Tristan's actions before everybody else, but they don't catch on until it's like too late. So by the time they do catch on, by the time all of that situation they catch on, it's too late. Zork's already been released. And Zork just sort of attacks everybody in the village. It gets real at this point. And when Yugi locates the room that contains the Pharaoh's name, the evil Bakura shows up, and they have a card game. They actually get to duel. We get to see a fucking duel. So, what did you think of Bakura and Yugi's duel?
I thought it was good. I mean, it was interesting, like, because you're having like the simultaneous of this going on and all the Egypt stuff, and plus, like, Yugi gets to duel by himself, which he so rarely gets to do.
I like this. I like that Yugi's the one that does the final card game duel in this one too, because it shows how much he's grown. Like, he's gotten so much better because of Yami. And it's cool to see, him dueling against Bakura and actually holding his own. And it's a legitimately good duel. Bakura never likes to wipe your life points out. He always likes to beat you in these weird, obscure ways. Like, the last time was with the Ouija board. This time, he wants Yugi to draw until he has no more cards.
Yeah.
So, it's really interesting that that's his plan of attack. He makes Yugi draw cards based on how many monsters he has on the field. So the end goal is to make Yugi run out of cards so that he loses the duel. But Yugi's able to counter that. And since he's able to counter that by defeating him with Gandora, the Destruction Dragon, he ends up winning. So I do like that level of growth that Yugi has, and they're able to learn the name, but they can't read it, so they just know it.
Yeah. Like, I think they say in the, they're like, oh, we each memorized one of the pictures, so we don't get it wrong.
Right.
So it's just kind of funny.
It's like, damn, they couldn't like take their phones out and take a picture.
Yeah.
I've got the picture right here, Pharaoh. Yeah. It's on Snapchat.
Took a selfie with your name.
Right. It's on Snapchat, Pharaoh.
Oh my god.
You put my ancient Egyptian name on Snapchat. Oh god. I found your Snapchat, Pharaoh. I know.
Oh my god.
It's so stupid. But while that's happening, they're fighting off against Zork. And because Zork is released, the Millennium items end up getting separated. So I just forgot Dark Magician Girl's Mana, thank you. Mana and Isis go off to search for the Millennium items while the others go fight off against against Zork. They end up summoning a lot of duel monsters to fight off against Zork. Zork's able to pretty much just wall everything at this point. And then the fight escalates even further. They finally do get the Millennium items back, and Manon runs back and gets the Millennium items to each of them. Master Shimon, aka Grandpa, ends up taking the Millennium Key, because the person who did have the Millennium Key, Shada, he ends up dying. Everybody's dead. Well, most of the Royal Guards are dead except for like Seto.
Yeah.
Before Shada had the Millennium Key, Shimon had the Millennium Key. So he was a Royal Guard at one point. So he ends up using the powers of it to summon Exodia. And Exodia ends up fighting against Zork. What do you think of this, by the way?
I feel like this was really brief in the manga, because I only remember Exodia coming out. I don't really... Does Exodia win? Like, I don't...
No, he gets his butt kicked.
Yeah.
He puts up a good fight.
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, it's Exodia, so in theory, Master Shimon should have won, but whatever. What happened to that whole when you summon Exodia, you win the duel?
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, but Zork beats him. I mean, it's a good fight. He's putting up a pretty good fight against him. It's just, it can't hold a candle to that.
Yeah.
So when Exodia ends up fighting, it loses, but it does give them enough time to get the rest of the Millennium items to their rightful owners. So Yugi gets the puzzle back, and because he has the puzzle back, he summons all 3 Egyptian gods. They fight off against Zork. They get their butts kicked.
Yeah.
And then after that, I believe Seto puts in a last-ditch effort to use the Blue Eyes White Dragon. It fails. And at this point, now I know this is going to differ from the manga because Kaiba's here and he's watching the whole fight. And I love when Seto summons Blue Eyes, and Kaiba's just like, wow, this thing finally got interesting. Because he's watching this whole thing like it's a movie or something.
Grab your popcorn.
And he doesn't believe any of it's real. He thinks it's smoke and mirrors. He thinks it's a trick. He's just so in denial. It's stupid.
Yeah.
Like Kaiba definitely is in Egypt because he's in denial. But yeah, I'll be here all week, guys. But after that, after Seto loses, Kaiba sort of takes it a little personal, and he summons the Blue Eyes White Dragon. Now you're probably wondering, how the hell does he do that?
Yeah.
He just gets mad and a dual disc shows up on his arm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, so wait, isn't this still an RPG?
Yeah.
Or is this really Kaiba?
Yeah, So Kaiba summons 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons, fuses them into Ultimate Dragon. Zork and Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon have a fight. And I'm like, if the Egyptian God cards couldn't beat him, how the hell is this even holding a candle? The Pharaoh sees this, and when the Pharaoh sees this, he uses his Millennium Puzzle and the last bit of energy he has. He uses the Millennium Scale, fuses himself with the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon to create the Blackluster Blue Eyes Dragon Master. They fight against Zork. They lose. And at this point, little Yugi and the others, they sort of get dual disc and are able to use dual monsters as well. And they learn, hey, if we just believe in something, we can do it. Yeah. And that's how they're able to fly to Yugi. Natalie's losing it over here. I love it. They're able to fly to Yugi. And when they're able to fly to Yugi, Yugi says, did you guys get my name? And the Pharaoh asked, did you get my name? Yugi says, yeah, we did, but we can't read it. At that point, Taya sees that Yugi still has the cartouche on his neck. And Taya goes, if we think about it really hard, the image of Yugi's name will show up on the cartouche.
Yeah, and that's the same thing as the manga, but it still makes me laugh.
And then when they think about this, it shows up on the cartouche. And we get the Pharaoh's name, Atem.
Woo.
Which, as a kid, I was like, that's lame. That's fucking lame. Yeah. But Atem, Egyptian pharaoh Atem is able to use the light to summon the 3 Egyptian gods again. Only this time he fuses them together in order to make the creator of light, which is able to banish Zork, wiping out the darkness. And and we also learned that Bakura is Zork now.
Yeah,
I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, that whole thing gets muddled.
Yeah, apparently. Let's rewind a little bit before we get to the conclusion.
Rewind time.
Yeah, rewind time. Backwards. Apparently, Zork has been corrupting Bakura the whole time. Every move that Bakura's made is just Zork working through Bakura. And I want to say this has gone back way back since the beginning. I believe that being a thief was part of Bakura's whole deal. Him being a petty thief. But Zork's had little influences since this started. So he's been planning this since, he lost the last time. And it's all been winding back up to this moment. And the pharaoh was able to beat him 5,000 years ago, and he was able to beat him because he used his name, fused the 3 Egyptian god cards together into the creator of light, defeat Zork, and that was the end. What do you think of all of that?
Like, it does get very muddled because there's all these plot twists of, like, even how we were saying it's like, okay, this is all the world of ancient memories. Oh, no, wait, actually, it's a tabletop game between Yugi and Bakura. Oh, wait, actually, Bakura was Zork the whole time. And I'm like, I can't keep this straight. Like, there's so many things happening.
This is 20 episodes of events happening.
Yeah.
And I don't know, in the manga, you said it was shorter.
Yeah, there's a lot missing. Like, a good example, right, is when you were saying, with, like, Kaiba joining in on the fight.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure the manga just goes from, like, the Egyptian gods didn't work the first time, he fuses them, we're done. Like,
yes.
Obviously they give him his name thing, but yeah, this whole, like, Ultimate Dragon and Black Bluster, like, that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
so
none of that happens.
Yeah.
And in fact, they were putting their thoughts into Yugi's cartouche so that he can summon the gods. And while they were doing that, Zork attacks them in the middle of it, and Kaiba gets up with the last bit of his strength. Kaiba, not Seto.
Yeah.
It's Kaiba. Uses his dual disc and plays Ring of Protection.
Oh my god.
To block the attack long enough for them to, finish their whole situation.
Yeah. It's funny, like, because hearing it this way, it's almost like, if someone took the manga and they're, like, a huge Kaiba fan, and they're like, no, I'm gonna write it in.
Actually, no, Kaiba was a badass.
Yeah.
Yeah, so after all of that does happen, obviously there's one more trial that Yugi has to take, according to the creator of light. She says, you've done everything here. Yugi gives Seto the role of pharaoh, so Seto's now the pharaoh. And he goes back to the original timeline where he needs to duel little Yugi. And the reason he needs to do this is so his spirit can finally be put to rest. Oh boy. Everybody's in on this too. Everybody who's like there. Merrick's there. Bakura's there. Oh, and, yeah, good Bakura this time. Everybody. Yeah, like everybody's there. And I'm sorry. Whenever I see Merrick, I can't. He's a good guy, and there's no part of me that buys it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just waiting for him to go, I got you all in my trap, Pharaoh.
Lock you in the tomb. How does it feel?
This shit again, Pharaoh.
Yeah, and that's what, I mean, because obviously I love Merrick very, very much.
Right.
But, like, he has, like, no character.
Yeah, once he
Battle
becomes
City.
good, it's just like, ugh.
Yeah, he's pretty much just like another Ishizu. Like, he dumps some plot, and he just kind of stands there, so it's unfortunate.
Yeah, him being good bugs the crap out of me. But everybody's here to watch the ceremonial duel, and this is so that little Yugi can beat the Pharaoh and set his soul free. And little Yugi wins, which I think that's the most appropriate level of growth for Yugi as a character, is to show that he's able to overcome all of this and grow as a person. What do you think?
Yeah, I like this duel a lot because I'm sure they mention it a lot in the show too, with like Yugi doesn't really want to win. Like he wants to win and he wants to prove himself, but he doesn't want the result that's going to come from it.
Yes.
So it's like very sad. It's very bittersweet when he does win.
It's a very emotional duel, just considering that this is a wrap up of everything that's taken place in Yu-Gi-Oh. They've been through so much. So to see that if he wins, he has to set Yugi's spirit free. He knows he can't lose, obviously, because he needs to do this for his friend. But he knows he can't win either, because if he wins, then he loses. Either way it goes, he loses his friend.
Yeah.
So he's put in a very tight situation. And especially considering that Yamayuki's been the one that's been dueling in most of the duels, it's so, like, you're very on edge with this one. Like, you know that little Yugi has to win for the sake of the plot, but you're curious as to how. Like, how does little Yugi end up beating someone who has all 3 Egyptian god cards?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a very, like, emotional duel because of it. But does this happen any differently in the manga, or are we back on track?
No, it's pretty much the same.
Good.
Yeah.
So after that, we're pretty much done at that point. You know, they say their farewells, they head back. Yugi gives one last high five to the pharaoh, and, you know, happy ending, right?
I cry.
You cried? Did you?
Yeah, like even reading the books I cry, because when he like goes through and then like, you know, his clothes turn back into like his Egyptian stuff and everyone's waiting there for him. Like, it's so sad.
Yeah.
But it's so nice.
He gives him the thumbs up, and
yeah,
it is just not just because of the end of this particular conflict. Just, I guess it's because of the end of Yu-Gi-Oh! In general, like as an era. And obviously there are more Yu-Gi-Oh! Series to come, which we'll talk about later. But for at least for this era, I will say it was nice just, you know, seeing all of this come to an actual close. So, I guess with all of that being said, that's it, everybody, for Yu-Gi-Oh! But I want to ask this, though. As a whole, we're just going to talk about this arc right now. What did you think of this arc in general?
So, like, everything in ancient Egypt and the duel?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was good. I know I've mentioned, like, there was a lot of, like, rushing to get this finished on, like, the author's part and for, like, the animator wrap-up. So I'm always kind of sad because I wonder what we could have gotten if there was more time and it was, like, you know, less condensed.
If we had scratched out Grand Championships, I think this would have been a bomb arc.
Yeah.
But, continue, Natalie.
Well, yeah, it's just, you know, it's not a bad wrap-up. Like, I really like the last duel between Yugi and the Pharaoh. And it's, like, overall, it's very interesting. Like, it's a nice payoff to see ancient Egypt and everything that's talked about. It's kind of wonky, but, like, I like it. So
here's my take on it. Just Bakura planned this from the start. He planned this since, like, what? I'll say before Battle City started, at least. I think Bakura is just sort of generally evil at this point. And he did have plans to collect the other Millennium items. So it's not out of complete nowhere. Like, you know, out of all, I give Bakura a lot of crap. But I will say he is a legitimately good anime villain. Just for the sake of a villain who isn't just coming out of pure nowhere. You know, you get a lot of villains who just sort of show up, especially in this series. God, Siegfried, I'm looking at you.
Siegfried.
Siegfried and Darts, I'm looking at both of y'all. But this is a villain that I feel was very properly interwoven in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I do see it fitting that, you know, things should end with him. I'm not really sure how I like the whole Zork was behind everything the whole time situation. I mean, it does make for an interesting idea. But Zork is, like, supposed to be, like, the embodiment of the Shadow Realm. Like, he's the one that created it. And that's fine, said and done. But if you had just made it, like, Bakura is the main threat, I would have just been fine with that. As a kid, and I talked about this with you before we started recording, as a kid I did not like this saga only because there were no duels and I was a big card game fan, and I still am. I'm still a big fan of the card games. So seeing them divert from that just to regular monster fighting sort of like turned me off of it, but I still watched for the sake of, this is the final season, right? But as of now, watching it over again for the sake of doing the review, this saga's rose through the ranks for me. I say it's like my out of all of them, I guess I would say this is like I'll say it's my third or fourth favorite arc in Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's only because it's very character driven, or at least the anime part of it was, because those little moments that unfortunately, Natalie, you didn't get in the manga that we did get in the anime did serve to help boost the character development.
Right. Yeah.
Now there is a lot of holes. There's plot holes as wide as all get out in this arc. I don't know if there was some in the manga, but in the anime, there's gaping plot holes. Where did Yugi get game pieces from? How come Bakura gets these 3 game-breaking game pieces? How come, there's 3 Bakuras running around? How come characters are suddenly able to fly? It was just a lot of nonsense.
Yeah.
That was hard for me to swallow. Did you get any of that in your...
Yeah, most of those were the same, like the game pieces and stuff. And I think the flying, like Yugi says, like, oh, if this is a world of memories that's like a game, then we could probably fly. So they fly. So... Some of them are like partially like tried to be explained, but it's like no, whatever. Just keep going.
A lot of moments in the game are just because moments. Bakura can reverse time just because. These characters can do this just because. This character is defeated but not destroyed just because. Which I don't like just because is in fiction at all. But for this one, since there's no real power scaling, there's no monsters with attack points and defense points, and none of that exists, I guess I kind of just had to roll with the punches on this one.
Yeah.
And I guessing the idea was that it was a game within a game, which is why I had no choice but to accept the latter. Right.
Yeah.
So
you just kind of give up. You're like, sure, why not?
You just roll with it at that point, and I don't like doing that. And that's one of the things that's stopping me from making this my favorite arc. Like, if I were to rank them, I guess, I would say my favorite arc is Battle City, and I'm counting all of Battle City, not chopping it up into pieces. I would say it would be Battle City, and then after that, I would say it's Duelist Kingdom. Then after Duelist Kingdom, I'd say it's this, and then Osceola Voricalcos, and then Grand Championships is last. And then I guess Domino City is somewhere interwoven into all of that, but...
And don't forget Noah. You gotta put Noah.
Shit, I forgot about Noah. Oh my god. I guess Noah's before Grand Championships for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll say Noah's a little... Yeah, Noah's before Grand Championships. So Noah's like second to last, but Grand Championships is dead last. That's awful. I think we can all agree upon that. So that brings on an interesting topic. If you were to rank each of the arcs, what would they be from greatest to least?
I think my ranking is like almost spot on with yours, like probably Battle City, Duelist Kingdom, because this arc is really good, but I don't know, I feel like Duelist Kingdom just had more structure to it. Like, it wasn't as grand or as epic of a scale.
Yeah,
but it was Duelist Kingdom's just more iconic somehow.
Yeah, I think Duelist Kingdom also gets a pass because it's the first arc.
Right.
So you can't give it too much shit. The stakes were raised, but they weren't as raised as later arcs. And later arcs, things get sort of out of hand. Whereas Duelist Kingdom, I feel like the rules were kind of broken in terms of following the card game. But it does make up for that by treating this tournament like a legitimate tournament.
Yeah.
So it does focus on the card aspect. So you can't get too mad at it. Whereas in the other arcs, everything's on the line and things get destructive, but they end up breaking rules for the sake of it, or villains just pulling shit out of their asses for no reason. Enemies are losing just simply because they don't have the strength, or suddenly a monster's able to corrupt another monster. Infinity plus, I'm looking at you, freaking Orichalco Saga. Freaking illegal cards that somehow make viruses into dual discs. Like shit gets so out of hand at that point and unmanageable that I believe, this arc fits in perfectly with the other arcs in terms of its absurdity, but it does have a finite level of storytelling. Like, I will say, as storytelling, this one does a good job. That my only gripe is that I wish it wasn't a game.
Yeah.
Or, to the very least, it can be a shadow game, but just reenact the events. You didn't need to board game it.
Yeah.
I understand that Yugi's the king of games, but that still would have been the case if he had won the shadow game. I'm not sure why it needed to be made into a board game.
The only thing is, like, I guess it's kind of an interesting callback to, like, Season 0 / the original manga.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's, like, the only connection I can think
it's like
of.
a very vague connection. But yeah, so it's just, when you're saying all that, though, this saga did a really good job of keeping me entertained. It kept me involved in its story. Maybe it's because, and I will say, I think this is a lot better to binge watch, because as a kid, I had to watch this Saturday by Saturday when it showed up. And I think that's what really messed me up on this saga.
Yeah.
Because I had to keep waiting. Like, there were moments where it kept saying to be continued, and I'm just like, was over it. Whereas here, I watched it all into one giant setting, which made the story come out a little bit more cohesive. So, yeah. But I guess we'll use these last few minutes to just sort of talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Overall, because at this point, the only thing we need to do is talk about Dark Side of Dimensions, which we will do a review of at a much different time. So, just, this is it. This is the final arc. The anime is over. What Yu-Gi-Oh! I guess you can sum up as a whole in terms of this series.
I love it.
You love it?
Like, yeah, I mean, it's good, but, well, it's very interesting, because even though I say I love Yu-Gi-Oh!, I think, you know, us going through and refreshing over the entire series, you don't realize how much is, like, I don't know, like, I don't want to say unappreciated, but how much filler there is. I mean, like, half the show is filler. So it's very interesting to look at the show as a whole versus what people remember. I believe
it's because at its core it was meant to be a manga, and I can see that the manga, if you look at it just as manga form, I think the story just sort of tells from start to finish and just sort of ends, whereas the anime had so much going for it in terms of filler, and it does have a lot of filler, but oddly I believe that's what helped it. We got more moments with Joey. We got more moments with Tristan, Taya, Yugi, the Pharaoh, Kaiba, you know, all of that. Like, like you said, it's like somebody's Kaiba fever dream version of the when the anime took its place in the arc. But it does give us a little bit more of a character to look into rather than just, okay, his character arc sort of ends here. Now, it did hurt some characters like Mai with their character arc, as we've already established. But as a whole, I think the reason that I like Duel Monsters so much, the original series, is because of the characters, man. Like, the characters can be put in any environment, I think, and that would make for an interesting story. You can put Yugi, Tristan, Joey, Taya, and the others, you can put them in almost any setting. And I believe they fit very well together. It's kind of like when I talked about, real briefly on Twitter, when I talked to Polly about Ash, Brock, and Misty as a Pokemon trio. Is like, it was their characters that make them, you know, stand out so well. They were friends, and their chemistry worked really well together. That's why they were able to be almost anywhere. And that's the same here. It's like, I don't know if it was because it was the 90s. I don't know if it's because it was this particular group. I don't know if it's because that's the way art style and anime was done back then. But this was a group of characters that you can put in any particular situation. If you were to make a filler arc right now of Yugi and his friends, I still feel like it would work out.
Yeah. Because they're relatable and they're fun.
Yes.
You know, like, they joke around with each other, but they're, you know,
yeah, like, I remember when I was watching this arc, Taya was just like, we could do anything with the power of friendship or whatever, and Joey's like, yeah, we're right, we'll help the Pharaoh find his name together. And then everybody put their hands in, and Joey briefly comments, man, why do we always have to do the hand thing? Just like little moments like that. And then when they did it again, when they put their hands together, and Joey goes, man, I should have saw this coming. Just little moments like that just make for a better, I don't know, just make for a very comfortable group of people. It separates them from being just, some characters that are written to be written. So these are three-dimensional characters to me. These are the most three-dimensional characters. And if this series doesn't win anything, I say this series is the best when it comes to character development.
Yeah.
So, are there any other reasons you like this series in particular, or like any other things you want to talk about with the series? You can talk about good things, bad things.
I don't know. I mean, that's pretty much, I'm in it for the characters. Like, that's why I've never really sat through any other episodes of any other Yu-Gi-Oh series ever, because I'm too invested. Like, I just mostly like Yu-Gi-Oh for, like, Duel Monsters for its characters.
Right.
So if they ain't showing up later, I'm not watching. That's how it works.
I believe that's why they were able to even make Dark Side of the Dimensions movie, because they were able to use those characters.
Right.
I don't think this movie would have translated well if it was like GX or 5Ds or Zexel or Vrains or any of those others. I believe that Duel Monsters has a legitimate cast necessary to make for a legitimate movie.
Yeah, and I'm really, really glad that they did make that movie for, like the anniversary or whatever, because it just shows that they still care about the characters, and they are kind of timeless. So.
Right.
Because, watching, I know we'll talk about it later, but watching Dark Sides, I mean, it still felt like modern.
Felt natural. You could just hop right in. It was definitely just a welcome back. It was like I was watching. It was like I was a kid watching Yu-Gi-Oh on Saturday mornings again when I watched that movie. And we'll talk more about that when we actually do the review. But it's because of the characters. Like I will admit, Duel Monsters isn't my favorite of the Yu-Gi-Oh series. Like, it's in my tops, definitely. It's my second. It's my second favorite, only being beaten by 5Ds. But 5Ds loses to Duel Monsters when it comes to characters. The characters are definitely staples. They stick. They're people you'll know, and it's mostly a lot of nostalgia, but it's also just the way they were treated. So, I guess I'd have to say, thank you, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, for giving me something entertaining to watch for not just my childhood, but for this review, man. Yeah. So, is there any...
There's just so much.
Yeah, so is there any closing things you want to go off of? Any closing statements you want to make?
I don't know. I'll just say I like Yu-Gi-Oh! Because, of course, like, in a very meta sense, how it's all about friendship and stuff, you do meet a lot of cool people who like Yu-Gi-Oh! Still. So it's a good series.
It is a great series, and I remember, and I think we brought this up before, I remember the voice actors of the original cast. Like, let's say an actual trading card tournament were to take place, I remember the voice actors actually came to the tournaments, and they would do those script duels. And I gotta say, man, they were so well done, because it was just the characters being the characters. And I think we give 4Kids a lot of crap, but I believe this is the one time where they actually do a legitimately good job with everything. Yeah, there's some crappy censors. There's some censors that are crappy, which at that point you can just look at the Japanese versions of the show. But they do the voices well. They do the characters well. They do the characters justice, and I think they are also a big contributor of why I like the series so much.
Right.
But with any other closing thoughts, or was that it?
No, that's pretty much it for me.
Okay, so with that said, we're winding down to the end of our marathon. The next time we meet, we're going to wrap up the original series completely with its bow by reviewing the movie Dark Side of Dimensions. But we also have another discussion on the side of that we'll be doing, where we are going to just discuss like our moments with Yu-Gi-Oh! Not just the anime, but the card game itself. So we're actually going to actually tackle the card game, and I'm going to just talk about a little bit of the rules too, so that way if you've gone this far into our Yu-Gi-Oh! Discussions and don't know what the hell we're talking about, we'll actually be able to talk legitimately about the cards, the Duel Monsters, the trading card game in itself, speed duels, link duels, video games, merchandise, dual disc, all of that. We'll be talking about that as well. So with that said, we'll see you all next time. Have a great day, a great night, holiday, whenever you decide to watch this. And with that said, Natalie, take us out.
Oh no!
Yeah, take us out. You can do it. You've grown so much since this marathon started. It's up to you now. Yeah, it's up to you now, Natalie.
Thank you for having me, and I love everyone. Bye.
Yay!
That's it.